Police officers of Reddit, what are you thinking when you see cases like George Floyd? I am a police officer in a medium-sized suburban town in Texas. I have been in law enforcement for 14 years. I love my job, I love how I get to help people, and I love how I get to cause positive changes in people's lives. I love how 99.9% of the time, my badge is shiny. Today my badge is not shiny. I am tired of hearing the excuses given by other people for a police officer's misconduct. I am tired of excuses being made for people who tarnish my badge. I am so tired of hearing how officers have a stressful job and their misconduct was a result of that stress. You know who else is under stress? The people who called us, that person whose loved one just committed suicide, the family who called us because they found grandma dead, and now we're asking everyone questions, the 7 to 11 clerk who just had a gun shoved in his face, and even the guy we just put in handcuffs and told him he is losing his freedom. Sorry, but our stress is low compared to these folks. We might have to go into these situations, but we get to leave them and pretend none of that shit ever happened after our shift is over. I am tired of hearing excuses for the bad police officers. I am tired of the excuse, well, he puts his life in danger. Sure, I know we put our lives in danger. I've had guns, knives and even swords pulled on me. I've responded to bomb threats, suicidal subjects, assaults in progress, robberies in progress, etc. You know who else puts their lives in danger? Firefighters, deep-sea fishermen, loggers, people who step foot outside their homes in Chicago. We are trained to deal with danger, we are provided with equipment and training to help us survive those dangers. Do I face an increased risk of not going home? Sure, but that's why I am at an increased level of awareness at work, so I can respond to threats appropriately without panic and over-responding. I am tired of hearing about the thin blue line. I believe in the thin blue line. I believe in looking out for my fellow officers. I don't believe in hiding the misconduct or unlawfulness of other officers, and I have always spoken up. What many forget, standing behind the thin blue line doesn't mean concealing the misconduct of other officers. It means confronting those officers so they don't do something to ruin their lives, the lives of others, or violate the law or code of conduct. It means walking up to the officer with his knee on a suspect's neck and saying, "Dude, this is too much, stop," before the officer commits murder. It means walking up to the officer who has been drinking all night and saying, "Dude, I'll give you a ride home." Instead of hiding misconduct, prevent it. Help your fellow officer not do something to ruin his life or another's life. If you do see misconduct, address it, take it to the appropriate level. Stop tarnishing my badge. We took an oath to uphold the law, uphold our ethics and protect our communities. Sometimes that means arresting other police officers or holding them accountable for policy/ethics violations. This officer violated the rights of George Floyd and murdered him through his actions. The officers who were on scene and failed to act are just as responsible. There are multiple videos of this incident and there is no real question as to what happened. For those folks who wonder what makes it murder or manslaughter. Murder is the act of causing death to another human being through an action which a reasonable person would know, or intend, could result in the death of the victim. Manslaughter is the act of causing death through an act which is reckless in nature. Every officer in America is taught about positional asphyxiation, and while some departments allow neck restraints, all officers are taught the dangers of neck restraints and are taught not to apply pressure to the back of someone's neck or head when they are prone out on the ground in handcuffs. Floyd was handcuffed with little resistance and they were able to walk him across the street to a patrol unit. Floyd can be seen in his surveillance video falling to the ground next to the unit on the sidewalk side of the unit. Cell phone footage then shows the officer on top of Floyd's neck on the opposite side of the unit, the street side. There is a random man in the background telling Floyd just to get in the car and he can't win. Floyd can be heard saying he knows and he's done. This implies that Floyd may have resisted or attempted to escape, but was still restrained in the handcuffs. Floyd can be heard multiple times saying he can't breathe. The cell phone video shows the officer kneeling on top of Floyd's neck for at least 8 minutes, with around 4 of those minutes with Floyd being unconscious. Even if Floyd did attempt to resist or escape, there was no reason to hold him down for 8 minutes. What was the point of restraining him for so long? Why did the other officer not assist the primary officer with restraining Floyd so they could get him in the patrol unit quicker? Why did the primary officer continue to restrain Floyd by his neck after Floyd became unresponsive? Why can't the officer be heard at some point asking Floyd if he is still a tough guy? I can only come up with one answer to all of these questions, and that was the primary officer, Chauvin, wanted to prove to Floyd that Floyd was not such a tough guy. I see an officer assaulting another human being, going beyond taking control of a suspect, using force as punishment and ultimately causing the death of another human being. I see a second officer who stood and watched and did nothing, despite knowing that what the first officer was doing was a violation of law and policy. I see officers who were trying to get back at Floyd for running his mouth and resisting an arrest by using force they knew could result in death or serious bodily injury in a situation which did not justify using deadly force. This officer committed murder, plain and simple. This officer tarnished my badge and the badges of all police officers. Worst of all, this officer tortured his victim for 8 minutes. Imagine your last thoughts and memories being those of a police officer, a person who the public is supposed to be able to trust, placing his body weight on your neck, slowly asphyxiating you against hot asphalt while he asks you if you're still a tough guy. I hope this officer, and any officer who allowed this to happen, is tried and convicted. It's going to be some time before I can polish my badge back to a shine. In the meantime, a family is suffering, a community is burning, all because of one guy who should have never been an officer. What do I think? I think assholes like this make my job that much harder and damage the trust I work so hard for. I think assholes like this ruin people's lives and ruin families. I think assholes like these should be stuck in a prison with all of the people they ever arrested. I'm a former police officer, and so have had plenty of training and physical restraint of individuals being arrested. There is no police academy training officers to kneel on someone's neck to subdue them. That's how you kill a person. There is extensive training on how to avoid seriously injuring a person while restraining them, and I guarantee you every one of these officers was trained to never strike a person in the neck or choke them. The officer who killed him is very clearly liable for manslaughter at the very least, and I think the other officers who stood by have some accountability as well because they knew damn well that was not how you handle a person, and should have stepped up. Here's my question. Given that this officer was actively killing a man, through an illegal use of force, what would have happened had a non-police officer stopped him? Granted, then the outcome wouldn't have killed the man and thus there would have been no death to show that the use of force was obviously excessive. But that's the part that really makes me angry. Anyone who would have tried to stop this would have been arrested on the spot for assaulting an officer, even though the officer was literally murdering another human being. Lawyer here. While the literal text of most justification/necessity defenses would apply to using force in that situation, most likely the Good Samaritan would be charged with obstruction or interference with public duties. They would then have to convince a jury that there was no other reasonable recourse short of physical force. That's a tall order and I'd be real nervous for my client. In a worst-case scenario, our hypothetical Samaritan gets tased or shot or killed for their troubles. My thoughts? Record and verbally demand the officer stop is probably the wisest course. Absolutely sick to my stomach. I'm a lieutenant in my hometown police department. I started my day by showing the video to my officers and making sure my people understood that this is murder, plain and simple. You never, outside of a life and death struggle, do anything like this. George Floyd was handcuffed and on the ground. If he was still struggling badly enough that they felt a need to hold him down, there's 100 ways to do it safely. Use of force should always be as measured and considered as possible. There will always be times where an officer sees danger and has to make a split-second decision without the luxury of weighing the consequences. That clearly was not the case here. He had all the time in the world to think about what he was doing. He had multiple people there telling him to stop, and none of his fellow officers intervened. All of that is why I find this incident particularly disgusting. They had so many chances to do the right thing. Luckily, I have the fortune of working with good people who see this shit for what it is. Before the video was over, before I told them that George Floyd died because of this, my officers were muttering things like, "What the fuck is he doing? You can't do that shit and he needs to get off the man's fucking neck." Made me way prouder to be their leader than any number of arrests they could make to see that their instincts were not to defend the officer. For what it's worth, I'm glad that they were fired. I've heard mention in this thread that one of the officers has been arrested, which is great if true. I hope they're all brought to justice. Their actions, and lack thereof, were completely unconscionable. Not a local, I'm a Fed. 5 years into the job. George Floyd was murdered and it's fucking disgusting. We're trained that anything involving the neck is a no-go and is considered deadly force. We were also trained that if you make an arrest in a prone position, you search and then immediately move them onto their side or a seated position because the risk of asphyxiation is so great. If a suspect says they can't breathe, believe them and take measures to correct it. This training is reinforced at least twice a year in our use of force training. These officers deserve to spend the rest of their lives in prison. Retired after 28 years. Nothing less than murder. All the guys I worked with would never have considered doing something like that. You treat combative in custodies once they're secured as human beings. Nothing should be personal. Once they've been subdued and you are safe as an officer, you stand him up, pat him down and understand that your arrestee is at a low point in his life. Give him some dignity and you'll generally get his respect. It works 90+% of the time. That man was subdued and nobody should have been on him at that point. I'm a police officer in California. I am absolutely disgusted by the officer's actions. When someone is in our custody, you must treat them properly. I don't care if they are arrested for murder or forgery. They are a human with a story and they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. I had tears streaming down my face watching the video of George Floyd. We swore to protect our communities and that's what we set out to do every day. Putting a knee into the neck of a handcuffed man for an extended period of time isn't protecting. A man has lost his life due to the gross negligence of an evil person. May he rest in peace. Cop here. Disgusted. There are 1,000 reasons why this shouldn't have happened. Simple, easy, steps that should have been taken. Lessons that policing has learned over the past 200 years and basic things taught in every academy. Make no mistake, this was murder. Maybe not premeditated murder, but nonetheless murder. I will be angry if those officers do not get indicted. I was a cop in the military. In the police academy, this was one of the things that taught us not to do as it could crush the windpipe. The only time I was ever taught to use chokes and neck holds was in combat training for deployments. But when we got back we always had to attend retraining classes to relearn what we can do stateside. I work for a U.S. federal bureau but I'm not a local police officer. All 4 cops need to go to jail. Derek Chauvin, the cop with the knee on George's neck, should have gone to jail long ago. The guy apparently has a history of doing this. This is his 3rd time in 15 years. Black people need to keep fighting and white/Asian/Latino people need to support them. Justice for cases like this won't come easy, and it won't come soon. But if they keep fighting, I truly believe that one day, eventually, it will come. I used to be a police officer. It was fucking embarrassing going out the day after something like this happened. One of the reasons I quit was because I had no pride in my job anymore. For the people doubting if I used to be a cop or not, this is the only proof I really have. In order to get the police officer flair on r/protect and serve, you need to send the mods a pic of your police issued ID. Haven't been to that substance before I quit, but here it is. I worked in a place where the population was about 75% black. As a white cop, I very quickly learned a lot about being respectful and how to be tactful. Humor goes a long way and it's very important not to give off any sign of being fearful. They can sense it. You get used to shouts of abuse as you drive by and guys on the corner will try to provoke you by openly drinking beer. Is it illegal? Yes, but you learn to pick your battles. If you do ever need to stop someone and question them, you know that if you take too long, you will suddenly find yourself surrounded by an angry crowd who have no idea what you are asking. People in these areas are almost always reluctant to even be seen conversing with a cop out of fear of being seen as a snitch. It is true that if you do need to make an arrest, there will almost always be some level of resistance, which makes things very difficult as once you have made the commitment to make the arrest, you have to go through with it. I am not in any way making excuses for the cops in this particular video, but it isn't easy. However, the cop with his knee on the poor guy appears to be of the alpha male type of cop. These guys are bullies by nature and very difficult to work with if you personally police to different standards. It's very difficult to intervene as a partner as you will likely be ostracized. You take this route and your career is over. Your social life is over. Your marriage will have problems as cop families are pretty close. A post I can finally answer. Based in Scotland, I'm a police officer with 5 years service, 2 of which I have been a part-time officer safety instructor. During this training we go over retraining subjects and handcuff techniques that we use to a T. This includes all safety aspects including where to apply handcuffs, how tight they should be, ensuring the technique is done correctly and that the subject is in a controlled but safe position. Positional asphyxia is a vital topic we cover and it is reiterated time and time again that if a subject ends up on the ground we never, and I reiterate again, never, place any sort of weight on them. Hell, even when sitting in the back of our cars, we watch them and ensure they can breathe and are in a comfortable position for transport. What these cops did was just plain stupid, disproportionate and frankly an embarrassment to policing. I'd also use disgusting if I'm honest. I just hope that people know we are not like this. Edit. This is my first comment and it has received more attention than I could have imagined, which I thank you all for. To address some points raised in the replies. I appreciate I work in a far different environment, but we still have to restrain subjects while cuffed, and at no point has it resulted in an incident like this or even an officer in the position shown in the video. I absolutely condemn his actions, and this should never have happened. As for what was going on his head, I have no idea whether it be red mist or he thought something else. Either way, he should lose his job and face the full consequences of his action. Unfortunately, some hate, as expected, in some replies, which I understand. However, one officer cannot be held accountable for another, so again I hope people understand that this is a small minority of the job and the rest are always there to help. Stay safe, folks.